that said, "Hey, if you got the call, would you be willing to speak or be on the committee to testify?" And I was like, "Absolutely." I felt pretty strongly about this process. I'm trying to recruit ODs into my practice and into our state. I think anything I can do to make that more attractive. And when I was coming back and being recruited, I met with a doctor from Pierre who helped kind of testify for when we got orals and topicals, and the way he spoke about that, I don't know, that just lit a fire. He was a well-respected optometrist and did it for a long time, and I just loved how he stayed up on things and how he just pushed for our profession. And so I think all those things kind of kept me wanting to push this forward.
Hello and welcome to the Chris Wolfe Podcast on iCode Media. Today I had a great conversation with my friend Dr. Nick Wenande about what it took in South Dakota to pass their scope of practice enhancement. It was a lot of fun having this conversation. Please enjoy our conversation. As always, be sure to subscribe to the podcast, write a review, share it with your friends, and support those who support us.
As you know, patients with vitreous floaters are often frustrated by their symptoms. The challenge as clinicians is to offer solutions for our patients for vitreous floaters that are effective. But more often than not, the options of YAG vitreolysis and vitrectomy are not practical because the benefits don't outweigh the risks. That's where Vitreous Health from MacuHealth comes into play. Previously on the podcast, I've discussed the FLIES study with Dr. John Nolan, and the bottom line is that I can be confident prescribing this for my patients with floaters because I can tell them a large randomized placebo-controlled trial found that after 6 months of supplementation with Vitreous Health, floaters were reduced in size by approximately 30%, and 70% of patients had an improvement in their symptoms. Vitreous Health has been great for my patients, and we really feel like we have a viable option to treat patients with vitreous floaters now that we didn't have before. If you're not utilizing Vitreous Health for your patients, reach out to your MacuHealth representative now. We've been partnering with EssilorLuxottica 360 for a while now, and it helps us in 3 areas. First, they use social media campaigns to highlight products that we believe in and prescribe to our patients, and they deliver those patients back to our practice. Second, EssilorLuxottica 360 enhances our patient experience through staff training tools that help us simplify and streamline the way we communicate about our products and services. Lastly, but for my practice most importantly, it helps us make good business decisions related to our optical offerings. We will systematically and objectively analyze what our patients are purchasing and what they like, and removing products that our patients are not really using or not really drawn to. This, along with additional rebates and immediate savings, helps us continue to deliver high-quality products and services to our patients and keeps our practice resilient. Check out EssilorLuxottica 360 for yourself by visiting EssilorLuxottica360.com.
Nick, thanks for coming on. I wanted to discuss with you kind of the role that you played. I know there's a lot of people that had a lot of roles in the South Dakota Optometric Society's win within the legislature, and you guys have been working for the last couple of years to do this. But I wanted to kind of hear your experience because, first of all, how much experience have you had in terms of working with legislators in your legislature in South Dakota?
Really, over the last couple of years, it was a process. That first year, we felt pretty good about things and kind of the plan that we had in place, and we had actually put together a meet and greet, with House and Senate representatives in Sioux Falls, and we showed them a laser, and we got to sit down and really explain what we do on a day-to-day basis and how these procedures were certainly within our skill set. And that was really back in January of 23. And then going forward, we felt pretty good about things. It didn't happen that first year. And then that's really when I think we just built on what we had done that first year. We brought in Jeff Michaels. He helped us a couple times in both big group and then one-on-one scenarios, and then just a lot of prep work from all members to, hey, sit down with your legislator in your town. If you got them in for an eye exam, show them what you're doing. a lot of those types of things. Send an email, pick the phone up. So there was certainly a small group that helped with the testimony and prep that, but it took a lot of the members kind of working on individual levels to form relationships and get the ball rolling. And it probably took those 2 years. I thought we'd get it done in the first, but we certainly, with that second year, it seemed to roll a little bit smoother for sure.
Historically speaking, how legislatively involved have your members been? Have they kind of stayed relatively involved in a lot of the legislative races? Give us a sense of kind of the way that your House and your Senate work, and kind of the involvement that your grassroots efforts took over years. So even before these last couple of years, or was it just all done in these last couple of years?
I think there was probably some work done prior to. I don't know that I got super involved in it prior to that, and I think that probably goes for most of our members. I think there was a lot of side discussions as, hey, we saw some momentum in other states and felt like, hey, we could get this rolling. In terms of involvement in the process, I don't know that we had a lot of that. Our executive director does a nice job, and I think a lot of us kind of lean on her. But as we got this going, we said, okay, this has got to be more of a group effort, I think. And I think you can always have more involvement to these things, and you always want as much as you can. But I think we had a kind of diverse, between the young ODs just getting started and some of those docs that have been doing it for a while. I was impressed with their level of participation, because I think you need the full breadth of the association to really hit home here, because of their long-standing relationships and some of the weight that carries amongst their peers in their town, within these relationships that are already there. They know these representatives. They might be patients long term, and I think if they see them getting involved, that certainly helps the cause. So it was new to me in terms of how it all works, and the committees and the banter and the drilling that goes on. I mean, it was kind of like prepping for a big game. I've certainly had a few big baseball games in my life. It was like, all right, your heart gets pumping, and it's you're glad that people have done their homework, and it's a lot of it's already pre-decided. A lot of it's already like, we know what's going on here. We know who's yes and who's no's, and who's our soft yes and no's. And so it was cool to see all that unfold through the process, for sure.
What does so I know a lot of our listeners are outside of Nebraska and South Dakota. So give me a sense of kind of the optometric network within South Dakota. So is it, a lot of people think that South Dakota is just this big spread out state, and they're pretty correct, but there's a lot of these kind of smaller towns where optometrists are the only show. When I say smaller towns, when they're they're smaller towns, but there are a mass of people in those areas where optometrists are the only game in town. So kind of give us a sense of South Dakota as you see it, and the optometric profession in South Dakota as far as distribution goes.
Yeah, I think, we're the primary eye care providers. I mean, we're certainly the gateway. I'm an hour from Sioux Falls, which is kind of the biggest town or city, if you want to call that, in South Dakota. It's probably the city. It's really growing, and they've got lots of, that's our main source of ophthalmology. Rapid City's the other, but after that, it's really private practices that are carrying the load of primary eye care and getting these people into ophthalmology to have different services done. We're managing higher level cases most of the time, and really deciding how those outcomes and how that care should be triaged out. And so I think we certainly have to have a level of comfort for those higher level cases. We don't, it's not easy always to punt those people 2 hours to go get care done. Even an hour sometimes to have all those services done could be a burden for those patients. So, I think we have a certain medical comfort in South Dakota. Ophthalmology, to their credit, does a nice job trying to kind of get out in those communities. Ophthalmology Limited satellites out to a lot of clinics. Rapid City has ophthalmology that will come out. Access becomes an issue. It might be 1 or 2 days a month. So there's availability to some degree to get those services done locally. But it's not always easy. Mitchell does have a local ophthalmologist that does a nice job. She does a great job for us. So it's just the volume even of what we could provide. We've got 7 ODs, I think, in Mitchell. So we've got a lot of eye doctors providing a vast majority of the care, both locally and everybody that comes into Mitchell as a hub. And I think most of these somewhat larger towns in South Dakota have that same feel, as those little towns are already driving to get you, and then we're going to spread you out farther and send you out farther, which I think some of Nebraska could agree with how that feels sometimes. So.
Yeah, I think that's true. I think the other thing is that what we've experienced is, and not just in Nebraska, but across the country, when I was on State Government Relations Committee, one of the things that we experienced was that most of the time when those surgeons were satelliting in different places, they were primarily satelliting there for cataract surgery or more high-level, ACS or ambulatory surgical suite or hospital-based surgeries. And so some of the stuff that we're talking about and that were all able to do within South Dakota, they'll do if they've got the equipment there or if the facility has it there, but it's not really their primary driving force, and you almost have to convince them or twist their arm to do it. And so I think that when I think about the kind of access points when they're coming in 1 day a month or every other week, they're likely not doing some of the smaller procedures that we're talking about. And I think that's probably the case in South Dakota. Is that correct?
Yeah, you're right on the money.
So then how do they come to Nick Wenande? So Nick, you've been out of school now for, has it been over 10 years? A little over 10 years?
2015. Man.
Yeah, so nine, coming up. So how do they come to you and say, "Hey Nick, we need you to testify"? How did your name get drawn out of that hat?
I'm not sure specifically. I was approached by a couple of members that said, "Hey, if you got the call, would you be willing to speak or be on the committee to testify?" And I was like, "Absolutely." I felt pretty strongly about this process. I'm trying to recruit ODs into my practice and into our state. I think anything I can do to make that more attractive. And when I was coming back and being recruited, I met with a doctor from Pierre who helped kind of testify for when we got orals and topicals, and the way he spoke about that, I don't know, that just lit a fire. He was a well-respected optometrist and did it for a long time, and I just loved how he stayed up on things and how he just pushed for our profession. And so I think all those things kind of kept me wanting to push this forward, and I was constantly talking to our executive director on things about where are we at on this and why aren't we doing this. And so I think in some ways I got voluntold, if you're going to chirp, you're going to be at the front line, and I'm okay with that. So it was a fun to be a part of that, for sure.
Did you so as far as kind of the back and forth in Nebraska, there is some back and forth, but it's not so much adversarial. The way that it works in our state is that we have the proponents during the testimony session, the proponents will for a new bill. So we would go first, and then the opponents come back and get to say whatever they want to, and then it's those that are testifying in neutral capacity. So once and then the introducer of the bill will have a chance to wrap it up, to summarize. And so the proponents kind of get their ability to speak their piece after the opponents go at the very end through the senator who introduces the bill. But in a lot of states, there's back and forth. So the proponents, like for you, did you testify and then you just took whatever questions they had? or did you testify and then actually go back and forth with ophthalmology throughout that process? Give me a sense of how that works in South Dakota.
So there's proponent and opponent testimony, and you kind of each present your case, and you might have lobbyists or people that support you, like AARP or the Native American associations might support one side or the other, or you might have a particular lobbyist that wants to speak, and you have, like, we were on a shot clock, so it was like 15 minutes or so. So you want to be brief, you want to be impactful in that time, and you give your kind of prepared speech, so to speak. Both sides do that. And then really the committee then says, okay, I'm going to pick this apart a little bit. I've got a question about this, or why do you feel like you're qualified, or you made a comment about availability. Go into that a little bit more. We prepared maps. That was one of the things about, hey, look at the state of South Dakota. Look at all these ophthalmologists. They satellite all these places. And so there was a lot of explaining to kind of get through some of those details to help them understand what all of it meant. They asked good questions. They asked hard questions. They picked it apart. I was impressed. They were listening to cases all day, and they were very much in tune about making this right for the state of South Dakota too. And I think if I learned anything through that process, is they're really trying to do what's best for all of South Dakota, and they got a hard job. And so it's hard to not be, as you described, like oppositional. Like, you got to just be matter of fact. You don't want to make this personal. It's not. We're talking to an ophthalmologist on the other side. It comes into our practice. We have good relationships. Monday through Friday we're handshaking and high five, and here we just happen to be against each other on the opposite side of the line. And you just want to be respectful and matter of fact. And that part of it's interesting. We all have the emotional component of, like, oh man, they're testing me. They're saying I can't do something. But if you keep it matter of fact, and our testimony practice and our kind of our education prior to kind of helped with that, as just answer the question as you can, was important. I think it kept everything kind of running as smoothly as it could, when you've got people hitting you with questions. So,
was there one question that's on your mind that was like, man, I should have answered that better, or something that that just sticks in your mind that was like, that question was a tough one, or one that you just recall?
I don't know that I got a question that maybe we weren't prepared for, but I think when they started diving into the particulars of how the bill was wrote, and how that was going to play out, and what did you mean by this, that gets a little bit uncomfortable, because it's just outside of your realm. And our lobbyist and our supporter of the bill was really good about kind of stepping in that, and she killed it. I mean, she just nipped it. And so we just had a good team in that regard. But those questions, when they were directed at Amy Schulte, you just caught you off guard a little bit, like, what did you mean, or what procedures are you specifically talking about? And I think there was always strategy in how that bill's wrote, so you don't want to, like, totally unveil the scenario and go down the rabbit hole. And so she did a nice job of kind of swooping in and catching that before something that could have been said maybe would have been more detrimental. But that question was tough when they start really working on the bill. And I think majority of the hard questions came in the House. I wasn't on the Senate side. We had passed that easily in the Senate the first year, and so we actually went the tough route first through the House. That committee was tough, and there was a couple of health people in that committee that were really working that bill pretty hard, and they were obvious no's, and they were working their darndest to try to make that everyone, the kind of maybes switch to absolute no's too. And so it's always the gamesmanship of it that you go, okay, we're in a little bit of a battle here. That was the fun part of it too, is you see those guys kind of working their angles, because they're not hiding it. So
yeah, I think in those cases it's hard, as you say, it's hard not to be combative with them. And what you have to realize, and I'm not sure I do the best job, is I'm not trying to convince them, because my intuition is I want to beat you, right? Like yep. if you come at me with these and I know you're against me, I want to beat you, and I have to. And that's my natural path. And the reality is that I can, I understand these issues so well that I've thought about most of those answers in most cases, but I have to back off. It's like, I'm not trying to beat them. I'm trying to win the person that is kind of shaky, right? I'm trying to, one, not lose the battle, and two, I'm trying to win that person who's a maybe no or a maybe yes. That's who I'm trying to win. And so I have to remember that, because as you say, it's easy to kind of get jacked up and let's go, I'm going to do battle. And so that's probably the hardest part, is to articulate those points without giving away, like you say, giving away things that we're going down rabbit holes that are not relevant and not pertinent, but they're trying to get you to go down. So kudos to you for not going down there, and also kudos to you for not wanting to battle, because that's the thing that I really internally, my blood pressure goes up, and I want to start kind of winning, and that's not the goal, right? So then you have to kind of step back and realize, like you say, it's like we're just trying to communicate effectively for the people who are not, who are still pondering how they're going to be positioned on this. So let me ask you kind of final question, so we can wrap it up and be respectful of your time. What are your thoughts about the numbers? You got to have this many, you got to have that many. How are you planning? How do you think that this is going to play out in terms of training and certification?
The most common questions I get include, what ophthalmological codes or evaluation and management codes should I use? What ICD-10 codes do I need to bill with this CPT code? What CPT codes can be billed together and what can't? And my favorite, how do I manage a patient who has diabetes who comes in for a quote-unquote routine eye exam? These questions really highlight the confusion and uncertainty that serves as a daunting hurdle for providers, makes it more challenging for them to care for their patients and provide those patients with the best opportunity for a lifetime of ocular health and clear vision. That's why we built iCode Education, for this specific purpose. Our mission is to provide optometrists with resources to help you understand disease states, revenue cycles, and billing and coding, so that you can put that on autopilot and truly care for your patients. Check out iCodeEducation.com. That's EYECODE education.com. We've developed a premier billing and coding bundle that includes all of our billing and coding resources in one place. We also have a 10% discount code just for listeners of this podcast. Enter the coupon code EYECODEMEDIA22 at checkout. We'd love to work with you. Check out iCodeEducation.com. I want to discuss the MyDay toric contact lens for a minute. When I'm reaching for a daily lens for my patients, I need to know that it will be available in parameters that I want, and it needs to work. This improves my chair time and my patient satisfaction. The MyDay toric features the same optical lens design features as the most prescribed monthly replacement toric lens on the market. MyDay toric now completely mirrors the Biofinity toric's parameter range. To be clear, if you find the parameter in a Biofinity toric, you can find it in a MyDay toric. This toric lens design is multifaceted to ensure optimal visual acuity, lens stability, fit, and comfort. Its uniform horizontal ISO thickness and wide ballast band quickly orient the lens for better performance and simplified fitting. The MyDay material is CooperVision's softest one-day silicone hydrogel lens and features Aquaform technology, combining a unique balance of high oxygen permeability and natural wettability. The result is a highly breathable lens that keeps our patients' eyes looking clear, white, and healthy. So if you haven't started utilizing MyDay Toric in your practice, I'd encourage you to reach out to your CooperVision representative to get started.
That's a good question. It's going to be a little bit of a process. You know, the executive director has sent us things, the association sending us things to kind of keep us in the loop as to where we're at. They did a nice job we offered the 32-hour course in South Dakota actually prior to approval, and about 50 members took up on that. And so a lot of us have the first rung in the ladder. I think there's been some side discussions amongst the groups, both optometry and ophthalmology, to figure out, okay, we're here, let's form the relationship, let's make sure if these are the requirements that we get, good certification process started. But I think there will be some challenge there. You just never know how many of the opponents are maybe on board with letting us come in and do some of that training. I think once you get some ODs going, I think it gets easier. But those first few ODs, it's going to be a little bit of a challenge to get those cases, in a private setting. We do have some MD-OD settings that are very OD friendly, and I think it will be fine. But it's not going to just take off right away. I think there's a lot of motivated docs. They understand the value of the YAG and the SLT and some of those initial procedures, those the injectables and skin tag removals. There will be some of that, but I think a lot of us can see the immediate impact that SLT and YAG can have within the practice, both patient outcomes, financial outcomes. There's always all of that kind of intertwined. And so, yeah, there will be some challenge, but I think that's what allowed this to go through. I think perhaps we provide the blueprint of, elevating the bar. We kind of prove ourselves, the education, then the boards, and then some states have further qualifications. All right, we're going to go 32 hours, we're going to go a little bit farther yet, and so it seems and feels a little cumbersome, but, I think a lot of us feel that's what we have to do to prove it one more time. We'll do it because, we've got the training, the education, all the things. I can hear Jeff in his wisdom when he was talking to us, the training, the education, blah, 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 all the things that we can do and we've proven. And so, yeah, some challenge for sure, but exciting to know we're close. And they'll put a good plan together and it'll be executed. So.
Yeah, I think the one of the challenges or one of the things that a lot of people think or worried about is if you specifically lay out, you got to do this many and that many and this many, it will be an encumbrance to patient access. Because, like if you're in the middle of the state and there's nobody to get that original training from, then it's going to be hard to take time out of your practice to go and do X, Y, and Z. But I think there's two things I think about that. The first one is I've done all these procedures and it's been 16 years since I've done them. And I would still want to go through, like if I was practicing in South Carolina or South Dakota, if I were practicing in South Dakota, I would want to go through that again because it's been 16 years, And so I don't really have a problem doing that. The second part is that once you have optometrists that are certified to do that, they can sort of make the rounds to different communities as well to sort of oversee that, is my understanding, oversee that. And then the last point is that it may not be ideal, right? We may not want to list things out legislatively. We may want to have that take place regulatorily within the board. That would be the ideal, of course. But, as we get further and further down the line and more states come on board, I think what's going to happen is we have the original states that had this, maybe the first 4 or 5 states were able to do it in a really clean, open bill, right? An open bill that would allow the state board to do a lot of interpretation. But then, and those states may have had a whole lot of extra clout. They were able to come quietly. So when it happened, it was almost a sneak attack, so to speak. But now, ophthalmology knows. And so they're kind of slamming every single state as much as they possibly can. And so because of that, we're going to see these larger requirements be put on probably the next, in my opinion, probably the next 15 to 20 states until they can kind of prove all that's good. And the remaining probably 10 to 15 states at the end may see some of those things either more significant or even less significant because it's widely proven that the state boards can handle it and that that optometry in general can handle it. So I'm not necessarily opposed to those minimum numbers. Many state boards put it on the profession anyway. I don't like the fact that we have to do it. I don't like that we have to do it to kind of, be treated differently than other doctoral level professions. But, the reality is that no other doctoral level profession has another profession that's trying to control it on the other side like we do. Dentistry doesn't have it. Podiatry is such a small profession that they went through this early on with, mandatory residencies and fellowships. They don't really have that from orthopedics. They have a little bit, but not to the same level that we have it. And so we're the only one that every time we stand up to try to enhance scope of practice, somebody is on the other side telling the legislators that we're not smart enough, we don't have the training, we don't have the skills to do it. And so this is where we're at, right? And because of that dynamic, that's where we're at. And so it does make us a little bit unique, and so it's understandable. So any final thoughts, Nick? Going into this, first of all, thanks for coming on and doing and coming on and kind of explaining this. Second of all, thanks for all your effort in South Dakota to get this done. And not just to you, but to everybody else in South Dakota that was instrumental in achieving it and will be instrumental in implementing it. It's a pretty big feat. Congratulations. Any other parting words?
When's Nebraska coming on board?
Oh my gosh, Nick. I am. It's not for lack of effort on the doctors and the association. I would love to tell you that Nebraska is unique. Our unicameral is unique. We have a very interesting process called a 407 process that is by nature adversarial and by nature has become a process that senators, because we have a unicameral, senators rely on heavily. And I can tell you all of that. The reality, and it's true. It doesn't make it not true, but the reality is we need to do a better job with our grassroots efforts. We need to have better relationships. I need to have better relationships with state senators, and we work on that time and time again. We'll continue to work on it, but all of that other stuff to say that it just comes down to the same fact of we need to be all hands on deck if we're going to get this passed. In Nebraska, we need to have all hands on deck with the best relationships we can have. I mean, certainly, that's not to say there's really great relationships, grassroots, from a lot of docs in the state, but a lot of us need to elevate our game. And I view myself in that bucket. It's like, I've got good relationships, but they can always be better. And so every time I think about that, I think we need to keep working our relationships, and then at some point we'll be able to do what you all were able to do. But we've got a process that is pretty challenging to overcome because of the adversarial nature, and because the very beginning of that process is what's called a technical review process that has 4 of 7 people have zero background in healthcare. And they're trying to make decisions for the legislature, to advise the legislature about technical aspects of a profession. That's an uphill battle. Right now, we've gotten to the point of an interim study to try to change that process. And until that process is changed, it's going to continue to be a really difficult, not just for optometry, but for any health profession that wants to change scope. It's very challenging in Nebraska. So hopefully soon. That's a lot to say, hopefully soon. But what I do know is that I'm coming up in less than a month, in like 2 weeks. I'm going to come up there, and I'll be able to be up there for the hopeful celebration, and I'll get to have a beer with you and all your colleagues to celebrate your accomplishment. That'd be fun.
Yeah, no, it's great to have that kind of next part done, and now we get the testing and trials and the proficiencies, and like I say, I think you hit it right on the head. It takes a lot of work. There's a lot of relationships. There's a lot of backdoor channel stuff. There's Jeff and Amy, the people that I helped testify with. It took an effort to just be prepared and do your best when you're up there. You're representing your state, your association. You're trying to represent optometry in some degrees because this is a blueprint that hopefully somebody else can use. And so I'm glad it worked. I'm glad we've kind of put that behind us, and we can move on. Like I say, hopefully more states can join in, and we can really expand what we can do, because all these kids and all these students are coming out, and they're ready, they're prepped, and they want to do it, and that's exciting, and we should be working hard for them. So no, it's a good thing. It's a really good thing.
Awesome. Well, Dr. Nick Wenande, thanks so much for coming on. Appreciate it.